start with the prayers. Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Ukarastvandhakaro Vai Rukarastvanivartakaha Andhakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So last week we were going over both the enormous promise of the Mandukya Upanishad and also the challenge of achieving this promise. This is why the Upanishad is held at such high regards. And the reason we saw last week was that our understanding of the complete evaluation of the world and ourselves and God and so on, a complete understanding of that, essentially goes into two steps. One is that in fact there is a basis for the entire world. All the changes in the world are based on an unchanging stratum. And so this is what is called Brahman, also God. And so this step is characterized by what is called Brahma Asti. The Brahma is there. Very much like the story we went through last week in the 10th man story, where there was some dukkha, some wailing going on because of a mistaken notion that someone was lost. And once someone came around to ascertain that in fact was the cause of their dukkha, he said, don't worry, that problem is solved. And so this is the step called Brahma Asti. But then just by understanding Brahma Asti, you don't have complete moksha. You don't have complete freedom yet. That step is the second step, where in place of Brahma Asti, it becomes Brahma Asmi. That I am in fact that Brahman. Because, it is kind of nice to know that there is someone who's in charge of the whole world and so on. But my sense of insecurity and my sense of lack of freedom, of dependency, continues. Because I am now depending on, there is a little bit of hope, but it is not a complete done deal yet, as we say. So for that to happen, you have the second step, which is called Brahma Asmi. And this step is a little bigger step. bigger step that you have to take. You have to almost like break it down into some mini steps because it is such a challenging step. Why? Not because it is not due to any other reason except your own reason. As we mentioned last week, that Swami Dayanand used to say, you are in fact the issue and you are the solution of the issue. In the sense that I am not ready to embrace this enormous truth that I am the very basis of the entire world. And so it is not something that one can just do in one step. But that's what it needs to be done. You have to focus on your own ability. I was just happened to be reading Mandukya Upanishad the other day, and it says in the 323 and 324, there are two verses, very important verses. One should really get to know them and memorize them. And the first one is Na ayam atma pravachanena labhyaha na medhaya na bahuna shrutena yameva esha vrinute tena labhyaha tasya esha atma vivrunute talum swam. This is the one. And then the next one is Na ayam atma balahinena labhyaha na cha pramadat tapaso vapi lingat etaihi upayaihi yatate yastu vidwan tasya esha atma vishate brahmadhama. These are the two verses. So they point out the challenge that we are all faced with to make this big jump into the second step. So the verses says that just by listening to others and doing some japa and practice and so on, you're not going to be able to reach that step. That's not enough. It is necessary, but not enough. Then what is the one? He says, Na ayam atma pravachanena labhyaha na medhaya na bahuna shrutena. Bahuna shrutena means that, this is what happens. We cover a lot of Upanishads. We have done Kena Upanishad, we are studying the Katha Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad we just finished, and etc., etc. And then you feel that, I have done a lot. But really speaking, that is just a start. And so, what is then necessary? What is the ending point that I need to cover before I reach the second step? Second line says that Yameva esha vrinute. Vrinute means it's from Varanam. Varanam means to choose. Means when you decide this is what I need to do. That's nothing else that really matters in my life. This is the most important one. Tena esha atma vivrunute. So it's interesting, Sanskrit, one is vrinute, one is vivrunute. So vrinute means choice, your assertion that this is what I want to do. Like Sita Varanam. So she chose Rama, that this is the person I want to marry. So similarly here also, this vision of freedom is really what I want. Until then I am still vague and I'm not sure what I need to do. This is also good, that is also good. But only when you decide that this is the most important thing in my life, and this is what I want to do. Only then all the other things, pravachanena, medhaya, bahuna, shrutena, etc., they are only effective when you decide. And then the second line is na ayam atma balahinena labhyaha na pramadat tapaso viya api alingad. So there in the Shankara Bhashya of Mandukya Upanishad, it is pointed out that this step is not possible for people who lack the courage to take this step. Sometimes you see these high jumpers, and you feel, my God, how is he going to do this? How is he going to cross this bar without falling? But there is a certain will involved and a certain strength involved. And then we do, and practice also. So this is what it is. He says, na ayam atma balahinena labhyaha na cha pramadat. So this pramada means carelessness. The classical meaning, the normal meaning of pramada is overlooking, carelessness. It's okay, it's all right. Here, Adi Shankara has translated this as, you are still involved in the pursuit of other things, and the most important thing that you want to do is still not your main focus. This is called pramada. So he translates this carelessness into a wrong care. It's carelessness about the important thing and too much caring about things that are not important. So anyway, I just wanted to this struck me on the fact that the Mandukya Upanishad promise and also the Mahima, the achieving of the challenge and the promise is not an easy thing. We can get introduced to the whole thing, but it is not until we equip ourselves. The most important equipment is your own resolution. Yameva esha vrinute tena labhyaha tasya eva atma vivrunute. Then Ishvara reveals, oh my gosh, this person is serious. I better show my face to that person. So anyway, so these are the two steps. So with that, let us have a very brief review of the verses. I hope to not spend too much time on them. So let's just look at the first two verses of the Mandukya Upanishad. Om ityeta dakshara idagum sarvam tasya upavyakyanam bhutam bhavat bhavishyatiti sarvam omkara eva yatcha anyat trikalatitam tadapi omkara eva. This is number one. Number two, sarvam hi etad brahma ayamatma brahma so ayamatma chatushpat. Is the number two. Okay. So if you look at the introduction of the Brahma Asti and Brahma Asmi, anyway, we'll see that in a minute, but just to give you the structure of just again, this is a reminder. I think there's a couple of people that have not seen it before, but most of us have covered this in detail, so I won't go into any of those details, but it's good to review that. So, verse number 1 is what is called Omkaravichara. It's an introduction to Omkara. So the vichara means the analysis, the thinking. So here the detailed thinking will come later on in verse number 8 to 12. So there are 12 verses in Mandukya Upanishad. First verse is introduction to Omkaravichara. Second verse is Atma Vichara. Then verse number 3 to 7 are the details of Atma Vichara. And then verse number 8 to 12 is the details of Omkara Vichara. Now this is how it is laid out. Okay? That being the case, let us briefly look into verse number 1, which is Omkara Vichara. So, Mandukya Upanishad is quite famous. Just 1 second. Yeah. Mandukya Upanishad is quite famous for Omkara Vichara. What is Om? Why is it so important? And all of this is talked about in verse number 1. So, two things to note about the verse number 1. One is the name Om is the symbol, what is called pratika. So, pratika means a word symbol of Brahman, of Ishvara. Brahman and Ishvara are pretty much two sides of the same coin, if you may want to say. One is single coin, but it has two sides to it. One is Nirvikaraha Brahma. So Nirguna Brahma is one side, which is Brahman, and Saguna Brahma means the one with the Maya Shakti is the other side, which is called Ishvara. They are one and the same thing. Either you can talk about the wavy ocean or you can say the waveless ocean. They are pretty much the same thing. The waviness is a incidental quality, and the water is the intrinsic quality. But they are all the same thing. So Brahman and Ishvara being the same, Omkara is the appropriate name for Brahman and Ishvara. And why is this an appropriate name? Because it contains in it the meaning that Brahman and Ishvara are everything in this whole world. It's the other way around. Everything in the world, whether now or later, in the past, the future, whether it is moving or non-moving, the entire thing, the entire world is nothing but Brahman alone. It is the shining of the Brahman. This fact is, so the completeness and the totality of Brahman is indicated by the word Om, which will be explained in more detail in verse number 8 to 12. And this totality is spoken everywhere. We are just, we are teaching Purusha Suktam on Tuesdays. There also it starts with the same thing. Sahasra Shirsha Purusha Sahasraksha Sahasrapat Sabhumim Vishwato Vritva Atyatishtat Dashangulam. That it is everything in the world and even more than that. Purusha eva idagum sarvam yat bhutam yatcha bhavyam. So here the Sahasra Shirsha and Sahasraksha means all the visibility of everything that you can think of as the variety is nothing but Purusha. Purusha here also means Brahman. And not only now, but whatever there was in the past or what will be in the future will also be Brahman. So Yatcha Bhutam, Yatcha Bhavyam. So this is what is Omkara is being talked about. And Om is a very important, for that reason. You see, everything in the world has some kind of a name associated with it. Okay, so there is India, there is US, there is California, there is table, there are chairs. Everything has a name. You cannot identify something, cannot deal with it, cannot transact with it until you have a name. So Nama and Rupa are really two sides of the same coin. Now the question is, what is the name of the person who is the very content of the whole world? And also one which is not visible to our sense organs, because all the other names are controlled by our sense organs. Either I should be able to see it, or smell it, or touch it, etc., etc. Otherwise, I cannot think of any one thing which deserves a name. Nothingness has no name; it has nothingness. But here Brahman is something which is not the purview of our sense organs, and yet it is a vastu. It's a thing. You can't even call it a thing. It is a vastu, means it is an entity. What is the name for that? Om is the name for that. And this is why the Om is a very important one, so much so that there is a verse in the Shastra which says that Brahmaji, the very first born person from Ishvara, who is as knowledgeable about the world as Ishvara, as this is what we talked about in the Purusha Suktam also, the very first one, which is called Brahmaji, different from Brahman. Brahman is a neuter noun, whereas Brahmaji is a male noun. So Brahmaji, when he started to express himself, he said the following. This is the verse that it says, Omkarascha atha shabdascha dvau etau brahmanah pura kantham bhitva viniryatau tasmad manglikau bhau. He says the very first enunciation from the lips of Brahmaji. So kantham bhitva means the voice that came from his throat, means from the inner aspects of his life, of his self, is Omkaraha and Atha Shabda. Two words he uttered, Om and Atha. And we will see the meaning of Atha later on, if we do which is likely, I'm going to do the Brahma Sutra class after this one finishes. So there we will analyze the word Atha in more detail. In fact, the very first verse, not the first verse, but the very first mantra, the first aphorism of Brahma Sutra is Athato Brahma Jigyasa. So Atha, it also starts with Atha. So here also two words were spoken by Brahmaji, Om and Atha. And so therefore, so he says, Omkarascha Atha Shabdascha dvau etau brahmanah pura. Pura means the beginning of the kalpa. There's no real beginning. Pura means at first. But there is no at first. It is just a new dawn of a new kalpa. At that time, it'll be good to, for example, us, when we start a new day, when we end the day and we begin the day, and as much as possible during the day, we should at least think of the word Om and say it also. The moment you get up in the morning, the first word that should enter your mind, and you should say it silently, so if you're sleeping next to someone, you don't disturb it by saying Om, let that person sleep, but you just say silently Om. And why is that? He says, Omkaravichara shabdascha dvau etau brahmanav pura kantham bhitva viniryatau tasmat mangilikau bhau. Therefore, because it was spoken by Brahmaji at the very beginning of the kalpa, therefore it is Mangala. Mangalikau bhau. Atha and Om both are Mangalikau. Mangalam means a blessing. And a blessing is an important thing, because blessing means without any condition. I don't know whether we talked about it in the Purusha Suktam class or not. Maybe we didn't. So I do need to mention it in that class, so it will be a double. But here, Swami Maheshananji made a very beautiful assertion about Mangalam, a blessing. And in fact, Swami Chinmayananda also used to say the same thing in a different words. But Swami Maheshananji pointed a contrast which clarified the Mangalam for me even more than Swami Chinmayananda's assertion. So I'll explain that to you. Swami Maheshananji says, look at this. And by the way, let me start with Swami Chinmayananda's assertion. So Swami Chinmayananda used to say that the blessing of the parents towards their children is the most effective. Other people can also bless it and say, may you live long. We'd say happy birthday, many happy returns of the day. These are all blessings that people do. But the blessing of the parents towards their own children are highly effective because they have no conditions. They're conditionless blessing. Very sincere. This is what Swami Chinmayananda used to have pointed out. I remember this so well. Now, Swami Maheshananda made it clearer in his explanation. He said the following. He says, look at the mother's blessing towards a toddler or a youngster. Let's say up to 6 or 7 years old. I'm just picking out a number. And the mother's blessing later on when the child grows up to be a teenager or an adult. These are the contrasts that Swami Maheshananji pointed out. He says, the blessing of the mother towards the toddler is very pure. Why is that? Because she does not expect anything back from the toddler. She just enjoys it. Her blessings that may you be healthy. She gives everything that she has. Food, milk, protection, love, forgiveness, happiness. All the blessings are given to the child without any condition. However, later on, the blessing gets sullied. It becomes impure. Why? Because she starts expecting things from her children. She says, I hope he or she is good to me. I hope they take care of me. I hope they, I think I told you this once before, that one time my wife and had this is about 30 years ago or so, we had gone on a work trip to Europe, and also just to enjoy. So we were gone for like 3 to 4 weeks, and during this time I never contacted my parents. Normally I don't remember, it was letters or telephones. This is so long ago, I can't remember how we did that at that time, but at least we were regular. During this time I had not contacted them, and boy was she mad at me. When I came back and said, you have forgotten us? How come you have never contacted us? So we told them we were going to go to Europe. Yeah, but you could have done it from any place. Not possible. You go to a hotel and you make a telephone call, you have to pay 5 times as much. So we said, it's okay, we'll wait for it until we get back. Expectations. She still loved us, but the love was sullied because of expectations. So here, this is the word Mangalam. Mangalam means Ishvara's blessing, and the blessing of the chanting of Om is like a mother towards the toddler. No expectations. It says, may you live long. May you live, in fact, forever. This is the promise. In fact, you and I should become the same. I am immortal, and I want you to be immortal. This is the blessing. Mangalika Ubhav. So, the word Om is very important. Okay? Having said that, there is another aspect to the verse number 1, which I'd like to point out. This is verse number 1 represents the assertion Brahma Asti. And verse number 2 symbolizes Brahma Asmi. So the first verse is the first step, and the second verse is the second step, as we have explained before. So the first verse, which says, as you know, Om ityeta daksharamidam tasya upavyakyanam bhutam bhavat bhavishyatiti sarvam omkara eva yaccha anyat trikalatitam tadapi omkara eva. He says, Omkara, which is Brahman, is everything. Here it doesn't say Omkara is Brahman. That will come in the second ones. But here it says Omkara is everything. Means Brahma Asti. Because Omkara is a name of a Vastu. So this is what is called Abhidhanam Abhidheya. Abhidhanam is the name, and Abhidheya is what the name signifies. So the name table is the name. This is called Abhidhana. And the Vastu called table is the Abhidheya. It is the substance behind the name. So similarly, Om is the Abhidhana, And Brahma is the Abhidheya, right? And so verse number 1 simply says Brahma Asti. And so relax. There is something important going on. Someone is in charge of the whole world. Someone is the unchanging substratum of the whole world, which is Omkara, which is Brahma. This is the verse number 1. Verse number 2 now does the following. So as you know, Sarvam hi etat Brahma ayam atma Brahma saha ayam atma chatushpad. Leave aside the chatushpad. Now the leap is made. So there are really 3 things involved. So one is the Abhidhana Om, and then you leave aside the name. You now deal with Brahman as the Vastu. So he says, Sarvam hi etat Brahma. Everything is nothing but Brahman alone. And so now the equation between Om and Brahman is now done. Because the first one was Om iti etat sarvamidam. And now sarvami etat Brahma. Same thing. So all that has happened is that the Abhidhana and Abhidheya are now clarified. Then the Mahavakya. Ayam Brahma, etat Brahma, ayam Atma. Means that this Brahman is nothing but you. Atma means me, I. Exactly like in the 10th man story, the person says, I know the 10th person has not been lost. The 10th person is. And so there is an expectation, a certain smile on the face. Really? Are you sure? Absolutely. Oh wow, I cannot believe it. You think that? And then he puts the hand on his shoulder and says, you are the 10th person. And now the joy is unbounded. Oh my God. I cannot believe it. And in fact, it was interesting when we were students at PRC. This discussion once took place. And I think, again, I'm revising. I must have told this before also, so forgive me if I'm repeating. But I think many of us were shy of answering. Sometimes, you have these satsangs where a newcomer comes in and they ask questions that you are shy of asking as a senior student of, not a senior, but a committed student of some Swami. So I remember in one of the satsangs, somebody asked this, Swamiji, I think you are a realized person. So Swamiji is looking at him, he says, okay. He says, my question is, how does it really feel? And we were all saying, good question. We never asked him that. It's almost like impolite. But then it's good that somebody else asked him question. And so I remember his, this is not the only time, he talked about it other times also. And he says, well, 2 things. One is, you become totally relaxed and worry-free. There is no concern in your life. This is number 1. The second thing which is more interesting about what I was going to say is, you don't feel proud, you feel foolish. This is an important thing. So the discovery of Etad Brahma Ayam Atma, Brahma Asmi, you don't feel kind of like, I have really accomplished something. It's very difficult to accomplish. I must be a great person. This thought doesn't occur. This just doesn't occur. Instead, the thought that occurs is, oh my God, I cannot believe it. How foolish I was. Incredible. I bothered myself. I bothered a lot of other people. I made a lot of noise without any reasoning. Oh my gosh, I feel sorry that I did all this. I'm okay the way I am, and I pretended I was not, and I created havoc for a lot of people, including myself. He said, I remember, he didn't say all these words, but this was implied. You feel sheepish. Just like, the 10th person. So that's why that example is very important. Like that person, because it was a wrong notion that somebody has been lost and swept away in the river, had some repercussions, had some problems. He started blaming himself. And in fact, they said that it is, in one of the, there are different tales about this story, that he started to hit the bark of a tree with his head and injured himself. So he did a lot. But at the end, when he finds out, he says, oh my God, I cannot believe I did not count myself. How could I have not done so? Anyway, so this is the background. Brahmasmi. So therefore, the second verse is that's what it does. First one is Brahmasti, and the second word is Brahmasmi. Then comes the explanation of the Atma Vichara. So it's interesting. First so the Atma Vichara is sandwiched in between Omkaravichara introduction and Omkaravichara detail. In between you have Atma Vichara, is really the main one. Especially the verse number 7, as you know, is the main one. So that we will see, but verse number 3 to 7 detail the Atma Vichara. And this is introduced by the last part of verse number 2, which is Ayam Atma Chatushpat. So he says it has 4 aspects. So here the words quarters can be used because there are 4 of them, but not 4 parts, but 4 aspects. As we know by now, I've made this very clear that this is a top-down creation, not a bottoms-up creation. It's not like a house is made up of 4 bricks, well, multiple bricks, but just as a symbol. It means that in this ocean you could have 4 waves. The waves are nothing but the ocean. It's not as though you see the difference between parts and aspects? To grasp this well, if you talk about parts, and there are various people who talk about we are parts of Ishvara. Every human being, there are infinite number of parts. You know what the implication of this statement, which is not true, is? That Ishvara is made up of all these parts. And if anything goes bad with the parts, the Ishvara is affected. That's not what it is. So Chatushpath here means 4 different aspects. So the Atma has 4 different aspects. And this is all what we have to contemplate. So the Atma means I. I go through 4 aspects within every 24 hours. So the first one is Jagrita Sthana. Number 3, Jagrita Sthano Bahishpragyaha Saptangaha Ekona Vimshati Mukhaha Sthulabhuk Vaishvanaraha Prathama Padaha. Right? Okay. So here, I think that let me just go through. This is I was just making some notes to myself, and I think that this may be a point to point that out. This may be a place to not point to point it out, but a place to point it out. So if you want to talk about the existence of some vastu, some object, you must know that object, or it must be knowable. You may not know it now, but is subject to be known later on. So, like for example, a ring that you might wear on your finger. So the shape of it, the size of it, whether it is rounded, all of those kinds of things, you say, I want a ring like that. And so the ring is known when you look at it. This is what a ring is. Whether exactly what you wanted or not is a different matter, but this is a ring. So similarly, you may have a necklace. You look at a necklace and say, this is a necklace. So now you have things that are known from your experience. Okay? Now the question is, there is something which expresses itself as a ring. So the word ring and the vastu ring is an expression. It's a manifest. In fact, you could use this word. It's a manifestation. The manifestation. And the ability to manifest in a specific form must be there. So here, for example, it is pointed out that a clay manifests itself as a pot, as a cup. But only clay has the ability to manifest itself as the cup. Simple sand does not have the ability to be expressed as a cup. It doesn't have the ability. So the cupness, so grasp this point. When you see a cup, you understand that it's an expression of something that has the ability to express itself, which is a clay. Clay has to, this is just an example because clay itself has to be manufactured by someone putting some water and sand and some earth and kneading it and all of that, just like we made atta out of flour. So similarly here also a clay is made. But at least now the clay has the ability to express itself in a variety of forms. So here the variety of forms, and you are focused on it. You're saying, oh, this is a nice cup. This is what you go for these souvenirs when you go to some new place, or supposing you graduated from a university. And when I graduated from Berkeley, then you pick up some souvenirs from there. I want this kind of a cup and so on as a souvenir. So you're looking for some specific objects. But the clay is coming along with it. You're not looking for clay, but the clay is there. Similarly, we have a number of vastus in the world. Number of vastus, in fact, infinite number of vastus in the world. So these are manifestations. And we're looking at it. We're dealing with it. We're touching it. And that's fine. Because that's what I want. I want some cups and chairs and tables and carpets and all of those kinds of things I need. But I don't think about the fact that they are manifestations of something. But what Shastra points out is, do you know that they are the manifestations of you? Me? Yes. You, the Chit Swarupa. Exactly like a dream, all the dream things is nothing but an expression of your own consciousness. They are in fact the consciousness. And even while you are dreaming, the consciousness is there. In fact, the consciousness is lending its existence to all the things. So here also, when I see things, I am busy dealing with them, but I have no awareness of the consciousness behind it. If I can use two different words to denote this concept. I don't have any awareness. I don't think about it. In fact, I don't have the ability to think about it because I don't know. No one has pointed this out before. But once it is pointed out, it says, my goodness, all the manifestations of the world are nothing but the manifestations of Brahman and the Atma, which is one and the same. Here Brihadaranyaka Upanishad makes this very important statement. He says, Nahi drashtuhu drishtehe viparilopaha vidyate avinashitvat. Nahi drashtuhu drishtehe. So drashtu here means a human. Here I'll talk about any living being, but here the human living being. Drashtu means the knower, the person who is seeing, who is touching, who is hearing, who is smelling. And so that person is called drashtuhu. Drashtuhu drishtihi viparilopahana vidyate. He says, please see this clearly, that the content of the various things itself is never changing. As in that example, please see that all the manifestations of the clay may be separate, but the clay never changes. It's always the same. So there I can see the clay. Here, because of the remarkable design of the world, the Atma itself is unseen, but it's very obvious that it is there, because all these manifestations come out of it, they stay within it, and then they disappear within it. But the awareness, the consciousness never changes, never goes away. Avinashitvat, because it is never destroyed. Nahi viparilopaha vidyate. You cannot say, I saw the consciousness disappear. You cannot do that. Even the person who's saying that is conscious. So in this case, the Atma has 4 different manifestations. This is the meaning for Chatushpat. It has 4 different manifestations, just like you have a ring and you have a necklace and you have something else, a pendant, and the 4th one is the gold, which will be pointed out, which is the Turiya. So this is something that I have to see very clearly, that really within a 24-hour period, I have 3 manifestations. And what the 3 manifestations prove, show very clearly, is that behind the manifestation there is a content. Just like clay also doesn't change, similarly, in my manifestations, I don't change. What has to be seen. And so this is what then is pointed out in the verse number 3 to 7, and we will cover that next week. And so each of the manifestations has been given a name, and we'll quickly go through that. It won't take us that long to do so. But really the fundamentals of what this Upanishad is all about is the more important thing, and we should view it that way. So with that, let me close the class, and we will continue next week. Om Swasti Prajabhyah Paripalayantam Nyayena Margena Mahim Mahishaha Go Brahmanebhya Shubhamastu Nityam Loka Samastha Sukhino Bhavantu Kale Varshatu Parjanyaha Prithvi Sasya Shalini Desho Yam Shobharahitaha Brahmana Santu Nirbhayaha Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. You're right, I forgot to put the mic on again. I just saw the discussion. My apologies. I was late coming in to connect everything, and I forgot to do that. hope you could hear something. I'm sorry about that. Suvarna, you were right. You're exactly right. All right. Any questions that you have? But it's good to see you all. Sanjeev, you had said that you had not started this from the very beginning, so I'm happy that we are going a quick review of the Mandukya. And Kirsten, very nice to see you again. You are so regular from Italy. And in fact, you attend both the classes. You are really remarkable how you are able to do so. Namaste to everybody else. I think I should just let you know that I was uncertain about. I was thinking of taking Brahma Sutra after this, but not certain that I was going to. And so Chawla and Zarina had gone to meet with Swami Paramarthananda in Chennai, as I think you might know this, back in December, I think it was, or January. And they asked him specifically about Brahma Sutra, whether it can be taught without going through the Sanskrit, because normally it is taught to people who know Sanskrit well, but since many of you don't, they were curious. And Swami Paramarthananda told them, yes, I have actually taught it with some semi-use of Sanskrit, and it can be done. So in fact, he sent some tapes with them, and I was unsure about it, but now I think I have a firm plan in mind that in fact I will take Brahma Sutra, and I think I'll do it in a manner that will not be, it will involve people, it would be okay for people that are not experts in Sanskrit. You may have, I hope that you have some knowledge of it, but also will not waste the time of people that want to get into more depth. So I will occasionally and quite often go into the etymological meaning. In fact, I'll do the Shankara Bhashya and so on. So I will mix them both, and I think I can do that. So I'm pretty certain that the Brahma Sutra is what I will be starting as soon as this revision is over. I do not want to give you a starting date. I think probably not until the end of this year. So in the meantime, Swami TV's classes also are going on, and many people are not here because of that. So we will not start that until that course is over, which is I think November 21st. So with the holidays coming up and so on, and I'll try to make a plan to when I would start, so I would actually promote it a little bit, so that we have a fixed time, and most probably we'll do it in the very first of the new year, in this time frame. So we will go back to the 8 o'clock. It requires a little bit more chanting before and after the Brahma Sutra, which is traditionally done. And so we will have to, we will chant the Dakshinamurti Stotram, 5 of them before and 5 later, and some other chants. So I think that out of an hour and a half, from 8 to 9:30, so we'll begin at 8 o'clock. We'll do the chanting in the beginning. I would say maybe about 15 to 20 minutes out of the hour and a half will be taken for chanting, and the rest of them will be for teaching and so on and so forth. So I think that's the plan, and I'll tell you more about it later. Okay, so with that, let me say goodbye to you, and we will see you hopefully next Saturday. Om.